It was a quiet Monday morning in late September 2019 when Harold Jenkins heard the knock. 3 sharp raps on his front door in their sleepy little town of Fairview, Ohio. He figured it was the mailman, maybe a neighbor needing help with groceries. But when he opened it, 2 serious-looking men in plain suits held up their badges. FBI. Harold, a retired postal worker who'd lived on the same block for 42 years, had never seen anything like it. "Do you know your neighbor in 3B? One of them asked. Of course he did. Sweet Miss Dolores, always smiling, always bringing banana bread to the community potlucks. She'd only moved in a year ago, but everyone liked her. Now they were asking questions. Serious ones. That morning marked the beginning of something Harold never thought he'd live through, a mystery unraveling right next door. Hit like, subscribe, and let's go. Harold Jenkins was the kind of man who kept a tidy lawn, waved at every passing car, and remembered the names of his neighbors' dogs. At 71, he'd settled into a comforting rhythm, morning coffee at the kitchen table, a crossword puzzle in the sunroom, then a slow walk around the block before lunch. Fairview wasn't exciting, but it was safe, predictable, and full of familiar faces. After losing his wife to cancer back in 2011, Harold found comfort in the quiet routines and friendly nods of his little street. He'd always said there was something good about knowing who lives next door. That's why, when Dolores moved into apartment 3B last fall, he'd made sure to bring her a homemade peach pie and a warm welcome. She reminded him of someone from his church group, kind, polite, maybe a little private. But lately, Harold had noticed strange cars parked out front. He told himself not to be nosy. Still, something didn't sit quite right. It started with a power outage one Thursday evening in early October. Nothing big, just a flicker, a moment of darkness, then the lights came back on. But Harold, sitting in his recliner with a library book, noticed something odd. While the rest of the building's windows stayed dark for several seconds, Dolores's apartment lit back up almost instantly. He thought maybe she had a generator, but that seemed strange for a woman who didn't even drive. Then there was the package, a large, unmarked box delivered late at night, left by her door without a sound. Harold saw it the next morning, but by the time he returned from his walk, it was gone. Not brought inside. Gone. He didn't want to jump to conclusions, but things felt off. Dolores no longer joined the Tuesday knitting circle. And once, when she saw Harold outside, she turned back into her apartment without waving. It wasn't like her. Over the next few weeks, Harold couldn't shake the feeling that something strange was happening in apartment 3B. He started noticing odd noises late at night, soft thuds, drawers opening and closing, the low murmur of voices even though Dolores lived alone. Once, he caught a glimpse through the hallway window of a man slipping out of her apartment just before dawn, wearing a dark hoodie and carrying a duffel bag. Harold mentioned it casually to Edna from 2A, but she just chuckled and said maybe Dolores had a gentleman caller. Still, Harold knew what he saw. And then there was the trash. Dolores always put hers out early Tuesday mornings like the rest of them, but now it was every other day and always tightly sealed, never a whiff, never a hint of anything inside. Harold told himself it wasn't his business, but when a black SUV idled across the street 2 nights in a row with its lights off, he finally admitted something wasn't right. One chilly morning in early November, Harold was walking back from the corner store when he saw 2 men in dark coats standing near the mailboxes. One of them glanced up and quickly looked away, but Harold caught the wire curling from his earpiece. It clicked. These men weren't from around here, and they weren't delivery drivers. That afternoon, Harold sat in his recliner, staring out the window at Dolores's unit. He hesitated, then finally grabbed his old binoculars from the hallway closet, left over from birdwatching with his late wife. At first, nothing. But then, through a gap in the curtains, he saw Dolores talking on a phone, pacing with a tension in her shoulders he hadn't seen before. She looked afraid. Or maybe cornered. And then, for just a second, she pulled something from under the floorboard, a small, flat box wrapped in plastic. Harold felt a knot tighten in his chest. This wasn't just odd behavior anymore. Something serious was going on. A few days later, Harold was sorting his mail when he accidentally opened an envelope meant for Dolores. It had been slipped into his box by mistake. Inside wasn't a letter, but a folded document in legal-sized paper. Before he realized what he was holding, he saw the name, Darlene Cooper. Not Dolores. And below it, something that made his stomach drop, federal warrant enclosed. He immediately resealed the envelope and placed it at her door, hands trembling. That night, sleep didn't come easy. He sat by the window, staring at the shadows moving behind her curtains, heart pounding with questions. Who was this woman, really? What had she done? He thought about the times she'd smiled, the banana bread, her soft voice. Was it all an act? Harold felt a strange mix of fear and guilt. Had he ignored the signs for too long? And now, was the whole building in danger? Something told him it wasn't over yet. It happened on a rainy Thursday, just after 7 a.m. Harold was pouring his coffee when the knock came, louder this time, urgent. He opened the door to find 2 FBI agents again, same ones from before. "We need to speak with you," one said firmly. They showed him a photo, Dolores, but younger, with a different haircut and a different name. Darlene Cooper, wanted since 1998 for financial fraud and interstate identity theft. "We believe she's preparing to flee," the agent said. "Has she mentioned leaving town?" Harold's throat went dry. He hadn't seen her in 2 days. Her blinds were drawn and her mailbox was overflowing. That afternoon, as the agents waited outside in an unmarked van, Harold stood at his window, watching. Then he saw her dragging a suitcase, moving fast. For a moment, their eyes met. He froze. Should he call out? Should he let her go? Part of him still saw the kind woman from 3B. But the law saw someone else. Dolores didn't make it far. Just as she turned the corner at the end of the block, 2 agents stepped out and quietly intercepted her. No shouting, no struggle, just calm words, handcuffs, and a silent ride away in the back of a government car. Harold watched it all from his front step, rain pooling at his feet. He felt hollow. It was like watching a movie rewind in reverse, every smile, every kind gesture now shadowed by doubt. The building felt colder that night. Edna knocked later, holding a casserole, eyes wide with questions Harold couldn't answer. He just nodded, thanked her, and went back to his chair. But something stayed with him. When Dolores was led away, she looked back only once. Not angry, not afraid, almost relieved. As if, after all those years, the running was finally over. Harold didn't know what came next for her. But for the first time in weeks, the street felt still again. In the days that followed, Harold returned to his usual routine, but something had shifted. He still did his morning walks and tended the front hedge, but now he paid closer attention to the sounds, the faces, the quiet signs he used to overlook. One afternoon, a young agent returned to thank him, not for anything specific, just for being observant. Sometimes, the agent said, it's the quiet ones who help the most. Harold didn't feel like a hero. But he realized something. He'd spent years thinking life slowed down with age, that the world became smaller. But it hadn't. It just got quieter and sometimes more complicated. Dolores, or Darlene, had fooled them all, but Harold learned that trust is still worth offering, even when it's broken. That week, he baked his first peach pie in months and brought it over to Edna. The world, he figured, keeps moving. But it's people who choose how they see it. By the time winter rolled in, Harold had settled back into his life, but with a different pair of eyes. He didn't peer through the blinds anymore, but he also didn't assume he knew the whole story behind a smile. The building stayed quiet, and apartment 3B remained empty, though someone from the property company said a new tenant would be coming in the spring. Harold sometimes caught himself glancing at that door, wondering who Darlene really was beneath the lies. Was she dangerous? Desperate? Just tired of running? He'd never know. But now every neighbor who waved or brought over soup was someone he paid attention to, really noticed. Not out of fear, but care. Because people, he'd learned, carry more than they show. Have you ever found out something about someone close to you that completely changed how you saw them? Let me know in the comments.